And we're live. So, welcome everyone back to the Atlanta Analyst YouTube channel. I have a more than special guest joining us today live. Sheldon from Utility Sports. I mean, he has, you know, one of the best sports YouTube channels out there. I mean, he does pretty much all the sports. Most of you all probably already know him, but he really needs no introduction. I mean, Sheldon himself. What's going on, Sheldon?
Not much. Thanks for having me on today, man. I'm glad to be here talking some hoops with you, and I know you and I've talked a bit off camera too, so I think it's gonna be a lot of fun today, and hopefully everyone enjoys.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully one of many more. But like I said, it's really a pleasure to have you on. But we're not going to waste any time, guys. So we have some appropriate topics that we kind of want to discuss and have an open conversation with. The chat. You guys are also open to engage and talk to us as well. But I gotta start it because I gotta tell you, uh, the Eastern Conference is a loaded conference, and at least with 9 teams as legit playoff contenders that honestly, in my opinion, can host home court advantage. I mean, you look at all those teams down the list. So, I mean, what are you like? Who are your favorites in the East, and like where do you start predicting with the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the East, you have to start at the very top, and I think there's a couple tiers here. I think that the top three teams are probably in a tier of themselves, and those three teams for me is definitely headlined by Milwaukee. I think when Milwaukee's all healthy, you have Middleton, you have Drew Holiday, you have those other ancillary pieces like Connaughton. You've got some other guys in there, Grayson Allen. I like their draft pick of Marjan Beauchamp there as well. I like their depth. I like Brook Lopez there. I think he's the perfect stretch big next to Giannis. And then, of
Yeah,
course, Giannis is the guy. He's the one who really makes everything run there. Budenholzer runs his system through Giannis, and it's quite frankly the same system he ran in Atlanta. So you're fairly similar with Coach Bud yourself, and kind of the way that his mo is to space the floor and open it up. But in Atlanta, he was running that with Jeff Teague and Kyle Korver
yeah,
and Al Horford. He didn't quite have, the Giannis Antetokounmpo level player, despite having a ton of success with Paul Millsap. So, I think that Milwaukee's probably, the true favorite just because, I mean, last year they took Boston to 7 games without Middleton playing a second of that series. If they have Middleton, they would have won that series. He was their most predominant ball handler in the pick and roll. And, for other teams like looking at Dallas, Atlanta, that's like losing Luka Doncic or Trae Young for a playoff series. Those teams don't get through a series like that. Milwaukee almost did. And that's a testament to Giannis and Drew and the rest of the guys there. So I think with Middleton, they're probably at the top. And then I think a team that is number 2 in the conference, and this is going to probably stir up some feelings here, but I think Philadelphia is the second best team in the East. I know a lot of people are going to say Boston. I think Danilo Gallinari's injury helps Boston, actually, because I thought him on the floor would have really kind of hurt what that team's identity was of having, 7, 8 good defensive players in your entire rotation at all times. Danilo Gallinari is no longer that, good player, but just not a good defensive player. And I think he would have really hurt that team. But ultimately, with where they're at, I still think that Philly probably comes out on top because I think James Harden's going to have a monster year. I'm talking like 27 points a game and 11 assists a game. I think he's going to do that this year. I know a lot of people are really low on him. And if you watched the playoffs last year, I understand why. But at the same time, it's James Harden. He has an offseason to recover from that hamstring. You could tell it was still bothering him. I think he's going to come out and play really, really well this year. He's hearing all the noise, and he's going to shut a lot of people up this year. And then I think Boston's that third team still in that top tier for me in the East. So I'm interested in hearing what you think, though. I'm sure there's going to be some similarities, but I'm not sure. Maybe you're not as high on Philly as I am.
yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I think yes. I have to start off with who you talked about. Milwaukee is one of those teams where they're there, first round exit, second round. They're just one of those teams that just always seem to scare you. When you play them. I mean, you look at a core with Giannis, Middleton, and Drew. I do agree with you. I think if Middleton is in that series, I think that series is over maybe in 5-6 games, because I think that he just changes the whole dynamic of the series. Boston was having a lot of trouble, not only defending Giannis, but their role players, they all step up, right? You've got a guy in Pat Connaughton. You've got Grayson Allen, and then Bobby Portis, who I think really steps up when the lights are on. But I also the draft pick with MarJon, I think that's really good. I think he's going to take a couple of the guards minutes. They have a lot of guards on that team. But also I love the addition of Joe Ingles. Coming off that injury is a little skeptical, but I think when you look at what Milwaukee kind of needed, they lacked a lot of wing depth. They have a lot of guards that can play wing, like a Wesley Matthews, Pat Connaughton, those type of guys. But I think when you look at having Joe Ingles, adding him another shooter who who's 6'8", I think that he's really going to help him out. So yes, I do agree that Milwaukee is definitely the favorites heading into next season. But I think we're pretty much lock and step. Philadelphia is going to be special. I think a lot of people don't realize how close they were last season. Yes, Miami had injuries, but when you have Joel Embiid out the first 2 games, and then you get him back, and then you come back and tie the series. All they needed, which they lost in the Harden deal, was some depth, and I think you added that. You get a guy like D'Anthony Melton on draft night, probably better than whoever you could have drafted there. And then you look at adding a guy like Daniel House, another wing that you can go to, and then PJ Tucker. I think that he's one of the biggest adds, because Philadelphia definitely lacked a lot of toughness. You saw it a lot in the playoffs, but you also saw it throughout the season. They didn't really have any toughness to match up with some of the tougher and some of the bigger teams. And then, also adding a guy like Montrezl Harrell. I mean, I think that speaks for itself. I think the one thing Philly was looking for and needed was a backup big. And listen, they went out and they got that, and they went out and got it in style. They got him for 2 years on a minimum contract. I really think that Montrezl Harrell is gonna. I think he's just. He's really going to play well and going to blend well with that team. I think Philadelphia fans are a little concerned about Doc Rivers using him a little bit too much, but, we'll see. And then, lastly, since you and I talked, I've watched a little bit more of his film, Trevelin Queen. This is a guy that, I knew nothing about when they signed him, but now I think that if he gets some minutes there, if someone's injured, I think he's gonna really, really, really help them, and I think he's a really underrated player. I even underrated him because listen, I didn't even know who he was, but Trevelin Queen is a guy that I am now coming to really, really like his game. And then listen, I think that his defense could be there too. Obviously, I think he's still a fairly young player, so he can always improve, but Philadelphia is going to be scary. And then lastly, if I'm going to give my top 3, I wouldn't say, even though they made it to the finals last year, I wouldn't say that they're in a tier with those 2 teams. But listen, I'm going to say this. Boston is special. I think adding Malcolm Brogdon, if Brogdon's healthy, they're a really good team, considering they went to the finals last year. But, I really do like Boston. I don't know if they're in that tier. Like I said, even though they made it to the finals, I think a lot of things went right for them during those playoffs. And listen, I think that if you play a Milwaukee team with Chris Middleton, I think you're gonna lose that series. And then Brooklyn, they just melted apart in that first round. So I think that a lot of things went right for them. But listen, I think they are a good team. Get a couple shout outs in the chat here. Zeph the Reseller, what's up, man? Welcome to the stream. Jay Anderson, Trey will break Steph 3-point record. Hot take. Okay, listen, I would like to believe that. If he keeps shooting the 60-foot threes, I don't know, but we'll see. Julia Jenkins, what's up? Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. It's so good to see you guys. But yes, so Yes, Sheldon. I think our list is very, very, very similar in that. But listen, the East is loaded, and I'm excited to see what happens. In the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I am too. I think that the one thing too is there's always a team that kind of comes out of nowhere this year, which maybe that could be Cleveland. Obviously,
Yeah,
they made a big splash, so it's not really out of nowhere. But I think for the Cavaliers, if they were to enter this tier, it would be less about Donovan Mitchell and probably more about Evan Mobley, to be honest.
yeah,
Because I think Mobley's their counter to a lot of these teams that we just talked about. Like if you're going to play Philadelphia, you're probably going to put Jarrett Allen on Embiid, and Mobley's going to be your big help guy. And you're probably gonna flash double him. You're gonna use him as a rim protector in short roll situations between Harden and Embiid in those
yep,
matchups. And same thing with Giannis here. You probably put Mobley straight up on Giannis, or even what I think I would do if I was coaching Cleveland is if I've got either Chetty Osman starting or Isaac Okoro, I'd put someone a little bit smaller on Giannis and try and pick him up full court. Honestly. Make him work throughout the course of a game because otherwise he's going to outwork you in the half court and you don't want that. And then I think what I would do after that is try and stagger the two of both Allen and Mobley as help side guys off of that if I was running what Cleveland's going to do. And I think if Mobley takes that step, we know how special he is defensively, which is why I think Cleveland could be legitimate. But if he gets better offensively, is capable of handling it just a little bit more, and I think just stepping out a little bit further, taking a few more 3-pointers this year, not a drastic amount more, but 1 or 2 more a game. I think it could open up that offense even more because Donovan Mitchell is a little bit more assertive in terms of getting to the rim than Garland is. And I think that's going to be another benefit to that, especially if Mobley can pair well off of that. And I think that Cleveland could be ready for a step up, but at the same time, I'm not 100% sold on that just because, that small forward position is still a question. I don't know who they're going to start there. Probably going to have 3 or 4 different guys start throughout the year. Lamar Stevens could be, even Dean Wade some games. I wouldn't be surprised. Probably see Isaac Okoro in there, Chetty Osman. Heck, they might even start Karis LeVert as small forward. So that's 5 guys right there that I just named. So Cleveland, I think that they could enter that, but I'm not sold on that either. So
yeah, and Cleveland's one of those teams. Listen, they're a team that has a lot of optionality. They're definitely going to be one of those teams at the beginning of the season where we're going to see a couple of different lineups. Like you said, yes, we're going to see a lineup with, Okoro, and maybe that, I think that's the perfect blend. I think because Okoro gives you a lot of defense, when you have a guy like, 2 guys like Garland and Donovan in the backcourt. But, maybe that doesn't work because maybe Donovan and Darius, maybe they need to find a couple more shooters. Evan Mobley has to still improve that. Donovan's obviously a shooter. Darius can. But I think he's a really good ball handler. But maybe they do need another shooter. So maybe a guy like I think Dean Wade is a really good shooter. You look at a guy like Karis LeVert. Well, if they do start Karis, that's definitely an interesting fit. You're going to be really, really bad on guarding the perimeter unless you bring Jared or Evan Mobley out there. But I think that they do have a lot of optionality, and the optionality that they have is actually going to really hurt teams in my opinion. But also them bringing that Ricky Rubio, I think is big. Risking him injuring himself again, bringing in Raul Neto, a guy that I think is a really good backup point guard. I think he's a really good ball handler, and then obviously a backup big in Robin Lopez. I think what he's gonna bring. Everyone knows whenever he gets in the game, he's gonna he's gonna get close to the basket and he's gonna hook that shot in. But Robin Lopez, I really love that addition. And listen, Cleveland can be that team. I think that Cleveland is definitely a team that is going to be in the top half of the Eastern Conference, just because listen, the Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, yes, that is a dynamic team in the backcourt, but also I think the defense deficiencies it's gonna be made up by having Mobley and Jarrett in the front court. So Cleveland is definitely one of those teams. And then, I mean, obviously, if you look at the rest of the East, like I can name teams down. Like, I mean, you look at Toronto, and then you look at Miami, who I think, did not get better. But, if you look at a team like Miami or Toronto, or even Atlanta. It's just so many teams, and then Chicago. So, like I said, the East is loaded, and I'm curious to see, how this is going to work out. I'm curious to see, which one of those teams are going to miss the playoffs, and which one of those really, really good teams are going to be in the playing game. This is going to be a really competitive play-in. This is going to be really a really good competitive couple of playing games this year, and I'm really, really curious to see it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. And then, like, when we look at the West too, for some of the favorites out there, I think the West is. I think there's a wide range of opinion on the West right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Warriors just represented the Western Conference in the finals and won it. So you, by default, have to throw them in there. I know people are worried about them losing some guys. I don't care. I mean, that team has their main core. They've got Steph, Clay, Draymond. That's already good enough to get you in the playoffs, those three guys. And then when you throw in the fact that Jordan Poole's really ascended to what he has at this point, is probably one of the better six-man scorers in the league. The fact that Wiggins is on that roster, like he was so, I can't emphasize enough how important Wiggins was for their finals run last year. I think the Mavericks would have beat the Golden State Warriors had Golden State not had Andrew Wiggins. He was their sole answer for Luka Doncic throughout that series. And obviously they won in 5 games. They dominated that series, but Wiggins is a big reason why. Luka had trouble bringing the ball past half court. And struggled more than I've seen him struggle in a playoff series. And remember, he's played against Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. So I think Golden State's definitely in that tier. And then probably the two of the other teams that I would see in that tier are probably the Clippers. And then I know some people really like the Nuggets. I understand that. I know a lot of people like the Suns. I get that too. I still think that the Mavericks are probably the third best team in the West because when it's all said and done, chips are on the table. I think they have the best or second best player in the Western Conference.
That's it. That's interesting. I'll say this real quick about the West. The West is very, in my opinion, it's a little weird because I want to say it's stacked, but then you look at a lot of teams that are kind of treading the waters of contention. You look at a team like Portland and those teams. Those are the teams that are kind of like right there at contention. I don't think is there yet. But listen, I think that's interesting. If I'm looking at the West. Even though Golden State, and listen, I think with Golden State with the Wiseman are going to be, I think they're going to be even better. I think that if Poole gets better, I think that they're going to be, and then also I think two underrated signings they made, which I really like. I really like the Dante DiVincenzo signing. I think when you lose a guy like Gary Payton, you're not going to get a guy that's going to play the best defense like Gary Payton, but you can find a guy that's going to come in, be a ball handler, and that can defend a little bit, but Dante's has some injury history there, but I really do like that signing. And JaMychal Green, a guy that, they really needed some forward help. The Warriors were missing a big man all throughout the playoffs, pretty much, except for Looney. So, I think having Wiseman now with Looney, with Draymond obviously being able to play the 5, and then, adding a guy like JaMychal Green, is going to help that. He's more of a power forward, but he can play a little bit of a small ball 5. So I think them. But then listen, I don't think it's a short second, if not a first. The Clippers. If the Clippers are healthy this year, I think by far they're going to be one of the runaway teams in the West. And the reason I say that is because their team has everything that kind of every team will look for around 2 stars, right? You have PG and Kawhi. Those 2 guys are really, really good within themselves. And then you look at the role players that they have around. I mean, Norman Powell is a really good, Norman Powell to me on any given night can be a third option, if he gets really, really hot. Marcus Morris had a really good year last year. I mean, Luke Kennard is a guy, probably one of the guys that are not the best defensively on that team, but Luke Kennard is still a guy that can really shoot the 3 ball and can shoot the ball, period. And then Robert Covington, a guy that I really, really like, and they were able to re-sign him, right after the season. Reggie Jackson and Nick Batum. Zubac is interesting. Can be concerning at times. But I think Zubac with throughout the regular season is going to be really, really solid. I think at the trade deadline they're going to look at either replacing him or adding another big man because they do have a trade exception. Then Amir Coffey is a guy that I think can also be a difference making. He's 25. Terrence Mann, and then John Wall. So, I think when you look at that team, even if John Wall is not the John Wall he used to be, you still have a Reggie Jackson on that team. You still have a Terrence Mann, Amir Coffey. I think all those guys stepped up last year. When you look at, and then I think they have one of by far, hands down, one of the best coaches in the NBA in Ty Lue. I think that what he did with that team throughout last season, basically taking that team to play in contention with none of their stars and just, role players. Some of the role players are actually injured. So, I think that they have a perfect storm. Dallas is interesting. Luka is definitely a top 3 player in the West. I don't think that's arguable. Are they the third best team? I don't know. Dallas. Listen, I really like their additions though. Christian Wood, JaVale McGee, and then drafting Jaden Hardy, who I think can really get some solid playing time. Getting Tim Hardaway back, who is a guy that Tim Hardaway would have really helped in the playoffs if he had been there. Now, they're going to have a lot of optionality with this, but I'm not going to say that Dallas is the third best team in the West. I think that they definitely rank around 4 to 5, but I think it's a little tough to say that, with a team like Denver. If Denver's healthy, I think the additions they made are really good. And I'm not going to take Denver. If anything, I would take a team like Minnesota, but I'm not counting out New Orleans. Looking at the big step they took adding CJ McCollum, they're not going to get off to a slow start this year. Then looking at Zion coming back, Dyson Daniels, a guy they added, Kira Lewis Jr. coming back from injury. So listen, the West is, like I said, the West is very weird to predict. Dallas, I don't think is too far off that, but I think that there are probably some teams that, and if you put them in the playoff series, I think would give a team like Dallas some interesting some interesting matchups. But listen, I'm not going to fully disagree with you on that, but I am going to say that it's definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, and trust me, like on paper, I don't think the Mavericks are a better team than say Denver or Phoenix or even like you said Minnesota. I think Minnesota's got 4 players. Like you go into that series, Minnesota's probably got the second, third, fourth best player of the series, and probably like the 6th or 7th best player in D'Angelo Russell as well. So you look at them on paper and you're gonna see them as better. The biggest thing for me is we have the game breaker in Luka Doncic. Like last year, we weren't better than Phoenix. We just weren't. Phoenix was a much better team than us, much more complete. But at the same time, Luka Doncic, baby, the guy who finished 2nd in Defensive Player of the Year. And he's going to continue to do that. Luka, and this is where it gets really fun because we can talk about those matchups. And, do the Mavs have a good matchup for Nikola Jokic? Not at all. But at the same time, let's say that the Mavs in that series are running a 1-5 pick and pop or pick and roll with Christian Wood and Luka Doncic. Is Nikola Jokic going to hang out in space with either of those two? No. Probably not. No. Then we go on to Phoenix, and it's like DeAndre Ayton, by the end of that series, played like 18 minutes the last game of the season of the series in Game 7. Obviously, that became a blowout loss, but Monty Williams was starting to shy away from him anyway in favor of JaVale McGee, who they lost. And Bismack Biyombo, even, who I think played really well last year. I want to give him some props. Mm-hmm. And then let's look at Minnesota. I'm really high on Minnesota this year. I think they did a great job getting Rudy Gobert, but at the same time, perimeter defensively, like, where are you putting D'Angelo Russell? Who is he guarding? Is Anthony Edwards going to try and tag Luka Doncic all series? Because if that's the case, I don't think that will bear well for Minnesota throughout the course of a series. Jaden McDaniels is a really fun, exciting player. Gets a ton of chase down blocks and stuff. People have been overrating him. He is not someone who's going to sit down in the stance and clamp somebody up. Okay, that's what Mikal Bridges does. I almost said the wrong Bridges. That would have been disastrous.
Yeah.
But no, McDaniels doesn't sit down and stop guys. He's gonna have a ton of athletic plays. He's a defensive playmaker. I think there's a lot of value for that, especially next to Gobert and Cat because of all the length now. But that's why I still have Dallas in the top 3 here, is because I go through these matchups and I think, okay, how's Minnesota going to guard Luka? What are they going to do here? And I think the Mavs did improve despite losing Jalen Brunson. Like you said, getting THJ back is huge. I think adding Christian Wood and JaVale McGee. Last year, we had no athleticism in the front court. Besides Dwight Powell having the weird game where he gets like 20 points on 9 of 10 shooting or something. For the most part, he doesn't. Dwight Powell's a bad center for the playoffs. He's just not somebody you want to have on the floor consistently. Christian Wood, much more reliable. And we've seen JaVale McGee the last 4 or 5 years be really impactful on really good teams. Now, is he a true starter? Probably not, but I think what we're going to see here is a real split of time between Wood, Kleba, Powell, and also JaVale at that 5 spot, giving Mavs a lot of flexibility in front court decisions. So that's why I like them over some of these other teams just a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll stay on Dallas just for a little bit here because I do agree with you. I think when you break down like certain matchups that like a lot of teams don't have that player that can just. I mean, yeah, you may have that one grimy that can come off the bench and give solid minutes, but yeah, like D'Angelo Russell's not stopping anyone. All right, he's definitely not stopping Luka, but he's not stopping anyone. I think Ant Edwards is going to have to carry so much of the load on offense that his defense may not be there. Now, yes, adding Gobert, taking away a lot of that big man pressure off of Cat will help. But listen, Ant Edwards is not guarding Luka Doncic. I mean, the size is one thing, and then and then Jaden McDaniels is a guy. He still has a lot of developing to do. He's still a very young player, and maybe he does develop and become a really, really good player. I think what you're going to see is Minnesota try to put Dallas in a lot of pick and roll actions because you have Gobert, but at the same time, if you do that and JaVale McGee kicks it back out, it's just one of those things where Dallas is one of the unique teams, and I think there are some other teams in the league like that, but Dallas is one of those unique teams that when you have a point guard like that, it's kind of hard if you don't have a lockdown perimeter defender. You're not going to do well against those teams. You're gonna have to make up for a lot of it in other areas, and I'm looking at all these teams, and not many of them have like defenders that can. I mean, other than maybe like the Clippers. I think the Clippers have a really good shot against if not even Dallas, Golden State. I think the Clippers are one of those complete teams, but Dallas is definitely. I do like them addressing the front court. I think Nico Harrison was very blunt and he was very open about addressing the front court, because I don't think there was any secret looking at that Warriors series. We were all like, man, Dallas could sure use a legit rim protector and big man. But, listen, I think that's really fair, but also in the West and the East, you have quite a few sleepers, on both sides. And I think that, I think you're going to have a lot of teams. There's always that one team that comes out of nowhere and just where did you come? Like, why is this team so good? But I do think that you're going to have some of those teams. Like, who do you think will be that team on the Eastern Conference side?
So we talked about Cleveland a little bit. They're kind of hard to pin as a sleeper now because of the Donovan Mitchell trade. I think they were ready to take another step anyway. I think one team that really is a sleeper, and I'm not going to talk about. I think Brooklyn is so massively overrated. I'm so tired of talking about the Brooklyn Nets. I think that they're. I don't think that they're a good team. But I think that Toronto probably is the team to make that argument for, because they have a legit argument here of, hey, one of our best players last year was a rookie, top 4 pick, Scotty Barnes. He's going to take a massive step forward, I would expect. I loved him coming into the draft. His versatility, his defensive playmaking capabilities, his ability to playmake on offense. He's going to only get better. And if that shot ever comes around, oh my goodness. And then when you look at the fact too, I mean, OG Anunoby missed so much time last year. They're at Scotty Barnes is capable of averaging 18 and probably 7 this next year, or something similar to that. OG Anunoby last year was averaging 18 points a game and missed a ton of time. That's about 36 points in starting level play that you would expect to improve or stay healthy this year. And Anunoby, he struggled with injuries, but even Pascal Siakam missed a little bit of time last year and still made All NBA. This team is really deep and talented. They also added Otto Porter Jr. And last year, Nick Nurse had really no depth. He was playing a 7-man rotation for most of the year. I think we're going to see more Malachi Flynn this year. Drafting Christian Koloko helps a little bit. I wasn't super high on him myself, but I think he's another body in that front court. And I think we'll probably see Precious Achiuwa take another step forward, and hopefully Khem Birch can stay on the floor this year too. You have 8 or 9 guys there that are actually worth playing now at this point with the Otto Porter addition and Koloko as well, that I think it gives Toronto's much needed depth, and their top 5 is one of the best starting 5s in the league, that you could make an argument that if this team clicks, if everything goes right, Fred VanVleet's a very pesky good defender despite his size. They can defend really well. Offensively, if Scotty Barnes takes that next step and Anunoby stays healthy, that's where we're going to see that improvement from them that they need to make. Because at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to win a championship. I think they needed to make a move for KD if they were going to have a chance at that, just because I think their offense is just a tier below, where Philly and Milwaukee is. But ultimately, like if there's going to be a surprise team that jumps up into the top 3, I think Toronto's the team that could maybe do that in the East.
Yeah, Toronto is definitely number 1 on my list. I mean, Toronto, when you look at Toronto, and like you said, you made a really good point. Nick Nurse never really had much of anything to look to on the bench. Khem Birch, Malachi Flynn. It was really not much to look to. I think bringing back Chris Boucher is a really good thing for them. I've always liked Chris Boucher. I wanted Atlanta to go after him in free agency, but I think if he can take one more step, even though it's late in his pretty late in his career, I think he did get a pretty late start, but now I'm starting to see that he's just a really good role player. And then also, like you said, adding Otto Porter, bringing back Thad Young, but the core is the core in my opinion. The core is a really good, grimy, pesty team. Now, I don't think anyone was really that high on Christian Koloko, but when you look at a team like Toronto, goes after 7-footers, and they develop him pretty well. I expect Christian Koloko to get some minutes, and he's going to be really, really good for them. And I'm looking at their roster, and OG Anunoby, if he gets legit minutes, if he gets the starter, I don't know how they're going to do that. By having Scotty and Pascal and all those guys, but if he starts, OG can take another step, or maybe 2 steps, because of what he's already averaging 17 and 5.5 rebounds, and 2 assists. If his shot just gets a little better, his defense is already there. Gary Trent Jr. took a huge step with them last season. Fred is Fred, and then Scotty Barnes, like you said, if Scotty Barnes gets a jump shot, this kid is going to be extremely, extremely dangerous and special. Like I think out of that draft class, I don't think there's a close second if he gets a jump shot. And because he's already shown so much potential and the willingness to grow. Precious Achiuwa is going to get better. He's going to get better. Adding Otto Porter, I think a underrated bring in that also helped the depth of the team was bringing in Josh Jackson. A guy that can shoot the ball, but also is young and can come in and give really good minutes. And then Malachi Flynn, a little disappointing seeing him so far, but listen, he does when I've seen him a couple games come in and have really solid games, but I really think that listen, I think that Malachi is one of those guys that he has a lot to work on. You know, I'll spend forever talking about him, but he's one of those guys that has a lot to work on. And then I'll sum up here what I'm going to say about Toronto. You know, adding DJ Wilson, Juancho Hernan-Gomez. You know, I think that those are, you know, again, one of those lengthy ads. You know, Toronto's is one of those things that they're going to hurt you with length. They're going to hurt you with a lot of versatility on their team. You know, and then, you know, obviously Cleveland, you know, but we already talked about Cleveland. But listen, I think there's a lot of teams in the East that can be sleepers, but Toronto is definitely at the top of my list there for sure.
Right. And I think one team too that I'm interested in your thoughts here a little bit. We were planning on having a segment. Let's put them in just here for this discussion because I think they could be one of these teams. Atlanta. You know, they add DeJounte Murray for what I think is a pretty good price, get about a third of their assets back in a Kevin Huerter trade, which is insane. And they're at a point where, you know, Onyeka Okongwu last year really started to show more and more of what he was at USC coming out. And kind of why I think he's such a valuable big for them to have, whether they bring him off the bench, if he starts this year a bit, if Capella misses more time, you know, whatever it is, you know, he's on the roster, he's going to be important. And I think DeJounte Murray really fixed a lot of their flaws. So I want, you know, obviously you're the big Atlanta guy here. Everyone watches you for Atlanta Hawks stuff. Let's hear why would they be a sleeper team? What has to go right for this team?
Well, I think everyone's questioning the fit, right? Is it going to fit? How are they going to do it? You know, personally, I think everyone's already heard my opinion. I love the DeJounte Murray deal for them. I think that when you look at doing a trade like that, you know, you want to retain as many assets as possible. You know, usually when you're trading for a 25-year-old all-star, you're going to give up a significant amount of, whether it's your young core or your current core. And we give up Danilo Gallinari. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and play down on Gallo, but, you know, this is a guy that is an aging player on an expiring contract. And honestly, we made the deal for the first round picks. You know, it was unprotected picks or no deal, right? And you look at a team like Atlanta, they were ready to just like take that next step because of like we're drafting at like the middle of the draft anyways. It's like, why not move these picks on and go out and get something real? So I like it. And what has to go right for Atlanta, you know, listen, I think it's got a lot, it has to come from a lot of internal development, right? DeAndre Hunter has to really prove something this year if he wants that extension. You know, DeAndre Hunter is one of those guys that, you know, he's on and off because of his injury history. He's on and off, and he hasn't really gotten in a rhythm. Onyeka Okongwu is a guy I'm really excited. I'm really glad we did not give him up in the DeJounte Murray deal. I heard that he was on the table to replace one of the unprotected picks. Onyeka, I love Onyeka. You know, I think that he's going to eventually take Capella's spot. But I think now looking at what we've added, we really added what we needed, right? Defense. Justin Holiday is a really good defender, right? Mo Harkless, really good defender. You know, and then Aaron Holiday, obviously, as well. And then, you know, having Bogey still come off the bench, you know, along with DeJounte is going to help out with the defense. And I think John Collins' game is going to get better. Why? Because you add another ball handler, another all-star ball handler that is really, really he's really going to help a lot of the other guys, right? You know, it's kind of the same thing with the Sixers. You know, you add James Harden, you know, a guy that can help out a guy, you know, that can help out a lot of the other guys like the Thybulles and the Furkan Korkmaz and the Shea Miltons, you know, adding James Harden. Well, now with the Hawks, you had a guy like DeJounte Murray who, when Trey was off the court, John Collins was he was trying to search for his own. Same thing with DeAndre Hunter. You know, now I'm thinking that like this is really going to be a really good blend of guys. You know, I can come on here and be very, very biased. I'm not going to do that, but you know, listen, I think that Atlanta is really going to have a underrated season this year, and I think that they can. I think they can fight for a home court playoff spot, or they can be one of the teams in the play-in. But you know, I do really like them adding what they added this offseason.
Right. I think for Atlanta, it's kind of easy to be naturally low on them just because of the season they just had. But, they really struggled to start the year. That's kind of been an Atlanta Hawks trend. It's ultimately what got Lloyd Pierce fired a few years ago. Um, but this is a team that, 2 years ago was in the conference finals and basically ended Ben Simmons' tenure in Philadelphia. We don't. It's hard. It's hard to stay high on them. And when you look at them on paper, I would say they're definitely not as good as some of the other teams that we've talked about, like the Milwaukee's and stuff. And I think those are going to be tough matchups for them. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, for a team that had a serious flaw when Trae Young would go off the floor, they just didn't have any offense. They went from a great offense to a terrible offense just because one player subbed out. Yeah, very quickly. Like, it was night and day. And now for 48 minutes a game, they not only have competent guys on the floor for offense, they have 2 all-star level guards on the floor. One of them will be on the floor at all times throughout the course of a season. That is huge for a team. That's one of the only concerns I really have for Dallas is losing Brunson is you lose that second floor general who can kind of control the offense when one of them's off. Like, Atlanta has that now, and that's something they haven't had the entire time Trae Young was on that team. So that's going to be huge for them. But it's not just, DeJounte's a really good offense. He's a very good defensive player. He gets in the passing lanes. He's very smart positionally, and he's got good positional size as well, whether he's playing point guard or shooting guard. He's big and lengthy, huge wingspan, and he's going to be able to make plays not only just out on the perimeter, but he can collapse in, help around the rim a little bit, and he's also a very good rebounder at the position, which is another thing that I think is going to hide one of Trae Young's weaknesses. Just at his size and his athletic components, Trae Young's not going to sky for a rebound. DeJounte Murray will, though. And I think it just really fleshes out this roster. And, I wouldn't be shocked if this team's a 4 or 5 seed. And, if it was a weaker Eastern Conference, I'd almost be betting on it. But right now, this year is just so crazy that I'm not going to rule it out that they're playing in the playing games. Or maybe even on the outside in again with how deep it is. Chicago last year got off to a hot start before getting all these injuries. Lonzo, of course, is probably going to miss the start of the season. So that's not a good, beginning for them. But there's a lot of teams here that you could argue should be a top 4 or 5 seed. So maybe Atlanta's just naturally 7 or 8 because of that. But at the same time, if they're 4 or 5 themselves, it wouldn't completely shock me.
Yeah, and then listen, I do agree with that. I think Atlanta, adding DeJounte is just he's gonna help whoever's on the floor, like you said, at all times. And then listen, I think Trae was a lot for teams in the East to handle within themselves. And the reason I wouldn't be really surprised if they take a huge jump in the East. One thing I've noticed before the DeJounte Murray, Atlanta's always competed really well with the best teams in the East. So they've always gone down to the wire with a team like Milwaukee. They gave Boston a lot of trouble. And then also Brooklyn, Brooklyn really, I think they were exposed against a lot of teams, but you could really just see the 2-man show there. It was Kyrie, KD, and Kyrie. That game shot what? I think he shot like 35 attempts and shot like under 30% or something crazy like that. And it was KD. And I think when you look at Atlanta, going against some of those matchups, I think they're going to be tough against those matchups, naturally. But now I think they're going to be even tougher. I really do like the add of Justin Holiday, though. I think that he takes care of a lot of perimeter defense that we kind of needed off our bench. Lately our bench, last year I know our bench was Danilo Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, or Bogdanovich. Not really good perimeter defenders. Now you add a guy like Justin Holiday. Okay, now you have Mo Harkless is a guy that can come in and defend. I'm curious to see what Jalen Johnson's going to do. Adding Frank Kaminsky, I like him as a go-to big in case we need him. So I'm excited to see that, but for sure. And then moving rapidly to the Western Conference, they have a couple sleepers as well that are really, really. Listen, again, the West is weird, man. But what are your opinions on Western Conference sleepers? Who you think can just come up out of nowhere?
For anyone who's watched my channel, you guys know I'm not a believer in Sacramento. So I want to start out here by making any Kings fans mad and saying that Sacramento's not in this list. I think Sacramento is not as good as everyone else is starting to think that they are. Yes, they've made win now moves. Their roster is just not good enough. So, Kings fans, sorry about it. But I think Portland is a team that if there's a team that's going to overperform where a lot of people are looking at them right now, I think it would be Portland. I'm not in love with this team. I think that they needed to find a defensive center. And the fact that they didn't really have any draft picks at their disposal took them out of the Gobert chase rather early on. And that's the issue with them. I don't think Nurkic is a good enough center to win in this Western Conference, especially when you're like they've got a lot of very good players. And Damian Lillard's a star, but is Damian Lillard a top 7-8 player in the world? That's where you get a little shakier on him, especially he's in his 30s now, coming off abdominal surgery. That's it. He's going to be great. Don't get me wrong, but is he good enough to elevate the rest of this team where at like shooting guard, if they're starting Anthony Simons again, we're seeing Dame and CJ 2.0 where, hey, they're small. They're not going to guard a lot of guys. Portland has the issue that everyone thinks Atlanta has, which is funny because those two guys don't really mesh that well, in my opinion. Anthony Simons is best with the ball. Dame's best with the ball. And I think the two of them are bad defensively. I like their wing depth now. I like the fact that Nasir Little really showed a lot last year before, ending the season, missing some time. I think Jeremy Grant was a good addition. I think he's going to, find himself in a more natural role than what he was in Detroit. He's not a number 1 or number 2 guy, but he's a pretty reliable number 3. And then I think off the bench, Josh Hart's going to be important for them. And I also really like the Gary Payton II signing. He is the player. I think they should start GP2 over Anthony Simons. I know that's going to be a hot take, and Portland fans like always. Dude, the West Coast doesn't like me, man. Lakers fans are always annoyed at me. Kings fans don't like me. Blazers fans are upset when I say stuff like this. But like if you're talking about positionally building, I mean, last year they ranked 29th in defense, and Chauncey Billups is supposed to be a defensive-minded coach. Now, part of that was personnel. They missed all their good players, missed a lot of time, whatever. But if they're not top 15 this year, they're not going to be good. If they're not top 15 defensively. And GP2 is going to be one of the reasons that maybe they can get there, which is why I think they would be a sleeper team. But I think they have to start him and bring Simons off the bench for Dame. I think that's probably the best route. Now, it's hard to do that when you just paid a guy $100 million, so probably won't do it. But I think they should. I like Eubanks as a backup big for them. I think he had a pretty nice end of the year last year after getting waived by Toronto. I was surprised that Toronto did not, hold on to him in that Thad Young trade. But ultimately, Portland could be the team, but I just think the West is very locked in with some of the teams that made the playoffs last year that I still really like. The only team really from last year that I think falls out of the playoffs is Utah. So we're probably going to see, the Clippers are going to take one of those spots for sure. And then, all the other teams are kind of locks in there still. So it's a tough Western Conference to be a sleeper in, I feel.
Yeah. And Portland's an interesting team. Looking at the Dame and Simons fit, that's going to be something they're going to really have to work on because, like you said, they're both terrible defensively. Damian Lillard's not guarding. Well, he's not guarding anything. Anthony Simons, he's not guarding a parked car. He's like they're both really bad defensively. And then starting I think adding Jeremy Grant is something that they needed a versatile for a very long time. They hadn't had that, but I think it's a question. Simons is 6'3", Dame is 6'2", and then Nurkic, like you said. I mean, they did not have the draft picks at their disposal, or they weren't willing to move the draft picks at their disposal to get a guy like Gobert. But I think that would have been really, really useful to go out and do that. When you look at what they really need some defense in that front court. Because you're not going to have defense in the backcourt, right? So you kind of need what Cleveland has, really two really good defenders in that front court. They don't have that. Nurkic, I like Nurkic, don't get me wrong. He's just not a defender. And then Jeremy Grant, he can defend, but he's more that offensive type player. He's going to be, in my opinion, he's going to be that second option at a lot of times because, listen, I think that Dame and Simons are going to be on the floor together so little that it's going to be, Jeremy Grant is going to be that second option. Then drafting Shaedon Sharpe. I'm curious to see what he's going to be. Josh Hart again. Like you said, getting Nasir Little back, I really like that. They're going to be in trouble backup big wise. I like Drew Eubanks, but Nurkic goes down, which is probably bound to happen this year, or or something happens to Eubanks. You're gonna go with another forward and Watford or Greg Brown, the player 5. Like that's not gonna work very well. And then Justice Winslow is a guy that I really like. But like I said, Portland could be a sleeper. Are they probably the best team out of the sleepers that I have? Yes. One more sleeper that I would not consider New Orleans to be a sleeper. I think they're going to be a playoff contending team. Sacramento. There's just Sacramento. There's one of those franchises that they're not gonna make the playoffs again this year. And I mean they can be better than the Lakers. I don't know, but they're not gonna make the playoff. I mean, I like Malik Monk. Kevin Huerter, I was a huge fan of Kevin Huerter when he was in Atlanta, but you messed up a lot to get Kevin. You messed up a lot to get Kevin Huerter. You messed up future flexibility. You messed up, you lost 2 really good defenders to get Kevin Huerter. And listen, Sacramento's gonna be Sacramento. I think Keegan Murray's gonna be good. I think they have a lot to be excited about with him. But I'm very when you're talking about running Harrison Barnes at the 3. You're gonna have a lot of issues.
Right.
They're gonna have a lot of maneuvering to do.
Right. With Sacramento, who is Sacramento going to guard starting? De'Aaron Fox. They're going to have Malik Monk. They're going to have Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray as a rookie, who's probably their best defender in the starting lineup at this point, and Domantas Sabonis, who's not a good interior defensive big, he's not switchable. They're not going to guard anyone. And their offense isn't that great. Their offense is gonna be okay, but man, I just Davion Mitchell is their best defender on their team, and he's a short guard. Again, that I love Davion Mitchell, but he's not going to be able to make up for the sins of everyone on the team. Austin, welcome to the stream as well. Make sure you guys all hit the like button here for the Atlanta Analyst, and also hit that subscribe button for him as well. He's a really, really great dude and knows his hoops as well. So make sure to hit that sub button for him.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Sheldon, and welcome to the stream, Austin. It is the Sheldon, for sure, Austin. But no, listen, Sacramento, they are a poverty Atlanta Eastern Conference Finals year. Atlanta had no defense that year, and they had all offense, but they had more offensive players than Sacramento. Sacramento is, listen, this team is so it's so lopsided. Like I said, Huerter is good. I like Huerter. I'm not gonna trash on Huerter because I was a huge fan of Huerter when he was in Atlanta. Richaun Holmes, what are you gonna do with all these? Your team is just you have Alex Len, Chimizu Metu, Trey Lyles, Richaun Holmes. You have too many. You're the team is just it is not looking good for Sacramento, honestly.
What I think happened here is I think Monty McNair was spending a day on Basketball Reference and saw wow, dude, Domantas Sabonis 2-time All-Star. We can trade for this guy. Yeah. And he's kind of the 2-time All-Star where he's like a fringe All-Star, not an All-Star starter type player. So yeah, I just think that honestly, on any given night, if Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green were to miss a game, I think the Warriors would be competitive with Sacramento still. So that's kind of where we're at with the Sacramento Kings at this point, I think. For our next, what was our next topic here too? Oh, I think I lost you here. I think I think he's working on getting some of his stuff set up. So I think the next topic we are going to talk about, though, I'm going to give him a little bit of time here to get that all situated. I think we're going to go into some guys who could be breakout players this next year. So I'll start with my list here, and then once he gets everything set back up for him, we'll just go from there. So I think yeah, there we go. He's back. There we are.
All right.
So actually, let's start with yours, and then I think I'll add something to that as well. You already mentioned one of my guys by name a little bit, so we'll see what we got here.
Well, I have quite a few breakout players. I'm gonna try to be quick on my breakdowns with them, but for sure, I have on number one on my list. I have to throw in the rookie of the year, Scotty Barnes. Like, he had a breakout year last year, but listen, I think he's gonna have even more of a breakout year. And the reason why I say that is because he's gonna be one of those guys that we're gonna look at and we're gonna be like, this dude is like he's gonna be one of the generational talents that he's going to be so unique that every team is going to start looking for that type of player. Will they get him? Not sure. Probably not, because listen, Toronto is Toronto. And then my list is a little weird. I have a mixture of established players and rookie players. So I think the next one that I put a lot of thought into, which is going to throw a lot of people off guard, is Monte Morris. Him next to Bradley Beal, I think he is going to Bradley's going to make Monte better. Are we getting a little feedback there?
I think we're good.
Okay. Yeah. Bradley's going to make Monte better. And the thing with that is that Monte, to me, is already an underrated guard. I think that the way that he kind of breaks down the defense, and he's able to initiate the offense, I think that's going to be pretty solid for Washington. Now, we were joking before that Tommy Shepard's probably going to trade him away for 2 second-round picks, but I do think that his game is going to get better with having Porzingis, with having Bradley Beal and those guys. I think that, and also having a Denver buddy with him in Will Barton. And then I'm going to draw the list here, and I'm going to say Tyler Hero. I had another guy on my list, but I don't think he's going to truly make a breakout season. But Tyler Hero is a guy that he's going to be starting this year, and is a guy that if he has the ball in his hand, I think if you just kind of let him run the offense, he can really turn into something really, really good. It concerns him with his defense. He's not the best defender, but a breakout year I think is bound for him because he'll be starting. With last year him being a 6-man, I think now with him starting, getting in that role, I think he's gonna be really, really good. I was gonna say Patrick Williams, but he can't seem to stay healthy. So, but who do you think is gonna be like who are your breakout players? Those are kind of mine. It's kind of hard to make that list, but
yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good list. I think one that's I feel very confident in, and as a player I really like coming into his draft class, Devin Vassell. Came out of Florida State, kind of fits the Florida State Seminole vibe there, where you get lengthy wings who can defend. But he had a little bit more of an offensive game at Florida State even than most Florida State prospects do. It's funny you mentioned Patrick Williams. They were in the same draft class. I actually preferred Vassell over Williams because of his offensive game, and I think this is the year for him to take that leap. He's going into his third year in the league. And I think, toward the end of the year two, started to show a little bit more. But now we have the departure of DeJounte Murray. That offense is going to have to run through somebody. I think Keldon Johnson is going to take a good load of that. But I also think that, with Trey Jones, Devin Vassell is going to find himself with the ball quite a bit. And with his ability to create in the mid-range, he's lengthy at 6'7". And I like his defensive game. San Antonio is always more competitive than it seems like they should be. And I think Vassell is going to be a big reason why this year. To be honest, I think he would, if I had to pick right now, I think he would be my pick for most improved player of the year, because I think he's going to take that next step. And then I think some of the players you mentioned were really good. I'm going with some other guys here that I think are going to break out in big ways. Delano Banton for me, for
That's a
Toronto.
shocker.
Another lengthy player who, when he was in the Raptors 905 G League affiliate, he played point guard for them a lot, and he was averaging close to 25 points a game. I pay close attention to the G League here. And Delano Banton is a player that coming out of college, I wasn't really super familiar with, which is rare for me. I usually know a good amount of most of the guys coming out. Delano Banton is one of those players who kind of slipped under the radar for me. When Toronto took him, I was pretty surprised. But after watching him closely for this past year, I think he's going to have a much more impactful year. Now, breaking out, I don't think he's going to average, 12, 15 points a game. But I think we're going to start to look at him as a real contributing rotation player this year. Which I think is a big step forward for him. And I'm excited to see him take that leap, which is I kept him quiet during the Toronto segment because I wanted to save him for this one here. Another player I like, you and I have talked about this quite a bit. You brought him up earlier, Trevelin Queen. I like him a lot. He was the G League MVP last year. Daryl Morey goes out and gets him. He was part of Houston's G League squad. So there's some familiarity there. He kind of knows the ropes with Daryl Morey. I think he's going to get some minutes. Again, not someone who's going to average 12 to 15 points, but he's going to solidify himself as an NBA guy, which I think is a huge step forward for someone who tried to do that last year, didn't really get that opportunity as much, played a few games at the end of the year with Houston, but didn't really have a ton to showcase. And then two other players that I want to touch on. If Brooklyn's going to be good, it's going to be because this guy takes a big step forward. That's Nick Claxton. Out of Georgia, and you know him well, I'm sure. Yeah. Nick Claxton is, I like him defensively a lot. Now, part of the issues with him is stamina. He hasn't been able to stay on the floor consistently because around 20 minutes or so in the game, he's pretty gassed. You can tell. But going in through this offseason, he looks like he's in better shape. And I think, he even shaved his hair. So big changes for him this offseason. But I think he's going to hopefully come back improved offensively a bit. Of course, he pretty infamous for missing 10 straight free throws in a playoff game. That was pretty bad. But I think the switchability, I think he's going to be key for Brooklyn this year because you look at their center spot, man, it would have been nice for them to keep Jared Allen in that James Harden trade. And to be honest, all it would have cost them is a first round pick to keep him. Yep. They weren't able to find a way to do that. Cleveland, that's a huge move for that franchise. And I remember talking about it when it happened, saying that was a mistake by Houston not getting Allen. And it was a great job by Cleveland jumping in there. And I think if Brooklyn could have found a way to keep him, that would have been perfect for them as well. And now at this spot, too, final one here. New Orleans Pelican forward. I know a lot of people are going to immediately think Herb Jones. I think Herb Jones is already there. I think Trey Murphy's going to break out this year. I really like Trey Murphy. I think Herb Jones has already really solidified himself. I think that Trey Murphy is the guy who's going to take that next step. I liked him a lot coming out of Virginia. I actually viewed him and Herb Jones fairly similarly. Herb's a better defender, but I think Murphy's a little bit more well-rounded in today's modern 3-and-D era of, wing play. You're looking for guys who can do 3-and-D, and I think he's got a little bit more than that too. I think he can handle. He's more athletic than he looks, and I think he attacks closeouts pretty well. So he gives you somebody who you can rely on a little bit at that 3 spot. And again, we're looking at teams that maybe take a jump forward. Trey Murphy, New Orleans, if they take a step forward, everyone's talking about Zion. I think it's going to be because they have a consistent, reliable combination between Herb Jones and Trey Murphy this year.
That is a really good list. I didn't do that. I didn't do too much thinking into it like that, but that is a really good list. Like, I think all of those guys can have breakout years. And and I think that's a really, really good list. Now, which is going to be the last segment of the show. It's been a really good show. I'm going back and forth here, but we've kind of already talked about one of these. I'm gonna throw a curveball here, and let's finish out by talking about the Utah Jazz. Okay. We've had some prior conversations about this, about how we feel about their future and the assets they've accumulated by trading pretty much their stars and a couple of the veteran players. So what are your opinions on the assets that Utah, acquired? And also, like, do you think that they are? Do you think they're going to be a really good team down the road?
So this is a great one to end on here. I'm glad you chose this one. This is a twofold discussion for me, because when I look at the trade value, I hate it for Utah. But the one thing you have to factor in here, they're trading for their own pick in a way, because they trade all their good players. Their pick, instead of being at 20, is now going to be in the top 5. And it's going to be in the top 5 for the next 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So if you're someone who cares about winning at all, it's terrible. This trade is terrible, because your team's going to be terrible and you're not going to win at all. Like, and a trade that I like to reference for this is, Oklahoma City trading Paul George to the Clippers. Everyone freaked out about the package with how many picks. That was really the first, oh my goodness, trade, right? That sent all the picks, all the stuff, everything. Since then, Oklahoma City hasn't had a 35-win season, and the Clippers made it to the Western Conference Finals. And even in a year that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard both missed basically the entire year, the Thunder netted the 12th overall pick. Basically, right now, you're looking at a trade of like Alexei Pokusevsky, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and, Jalen Williams for Paul George is really what the package looks like so far. And obviously, without Shai, no one was everyone was talking about the picks. Shai was the most important part of that deal. Obviously. Yeah. He should have been. I would have loved to know what those negotiations looked like, because I don't even know if Shai was a breaking point for Oklahoma City or not. And if it wasn't, that's terrible. The draft picks, and this is the issue with Utah here. Who's their Shai Gilgeous they just got? Like, is it Colin Sexton? Okay, like, I don't know about that. Is it Lauri Markkanen? No. Is it Ochai Agbaji? Probably not. So, and Walker Kessler, like, maybe a starting level big at some point in his career. Like, they don't have a good collection of talent at this point. Everyone knows that this team's going to be bad, and the only hope here is that Colin Sexton looks really good and looks like he's worth $18 million a year. That's like the hope right now for them. And then the hope is that maybe they can trade Lauri Markkanen somewhere and make some other moves, trade Beasley, Boyan, trade Conley, all that kind of stuff. Like, and maybe Talen Horton-Tucker has a good year. Like, what are they really banking on this roster? Nothing right now, which means that those draft picks are going to be super important for them. But the issue is you traded Rudy Gobert to Minnesota, who has Karl-Anthony Towns under contract for the next 6 years. He's 26 years old. They have D'Angelo Russell, 26 years old. Now he's an impending free agent, but the salary cap's about to jump up. They might have cap space too if they do this right, which would be crazy if they do, because maybe they could kind of exile Russell, bring someone else in. But, even if they keep Russell, he's 26 years old right now. He's going to be good for the next 4, 5, 6 years. Then you have Anthony Edwards, who's 21 years old. This core is young, really good, and Gobert's not a player who's going to age out of the league. He's going to be good because he's positionally smart, knows how to position his body, and 7'1" doesn't shrink until he's about 80 years old. So he will be just fine for the next 5 to 6 years, if I had to guess, as a good defensive big in today's league, which is perfect. And this is why for Utah, what is that pick going to become for you? What are those picks? Maybe the 2029 pick is good, maybe. And like let's think about it. This year, the pick that they have from Minnesota. Are we going to bet on Minnesota making the playoffs? Yes, we both would say that. So that pick's going to be in the 20s. Who are they going to get that's even close to Gobert or Donovan Mitchell? Nobody at that spot, if I had to guess. Now, sometimes you can get steals, but I'm not a fan of it. Like, and that's the case with all those picks. And then when they trade Donovan Mitchell, they trade him to the team with arguably the best young core in the league. In Garland, Allen, who's only 24 years old, and Evan Mobley, who is a freak of nature. They traded 26-year-old Donovan Mitchell there. Both of those teams are super good and young. That is not where you want to trade your players for picks. You want to trade your players to a team that has old players or, probably good. Like, I would have loved to trade Donovan Mitchell to New York. Give me all the Knicks unprotected picks, please. Cleveland, I'm a little less sure of. Like, that team looks like it's going to be pretty good for a while. So it's like they're going to have to rebuild this team with picks in the 20s and their own picks. So basically, it's like the same thing as if Gobert and Mitchell tore their ACLs and missed the entire year and they were bad. Like, and then they could have just rebuilt that way, basically, but still had those two players. They don't have those two players now, and their roster looks terrible. They've committed money to Sexton and Markkanen. It's weird to me. I'm not in love with it. I think that Utah could end up being good, but it's going to be reliant on their own picks because of how bad they are, not because of the trades themselves.
Well, I think that is that's a fair argument. You know, Utah definitely I think with any team, you know, like Minnesota did not really care about giving up unprotected picks. Like it's like we're drafting we're drafting in the middle of the first round towards the back end of the first round anyways. Like, you know, what good does it do? Now, the Cleveland picks, I was a little bit more like, okay, the East is a little stacked, so maybe they find themselves at a high pick. Their first unprotected pick from Cleveland is coming in 2025. So that's when it developed Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Like maybe Donovan Mitchell leaves in free agency, but I think he's going to want to stay. You know, I think he's going to want to stay. To your point, yes, give me all the Knicks unprotected picks. I want all your picks. I want all your swaps. I want every second round pick. I want all your picks, New York. You can give me one good young player. I want all your picks because you know what? I know at the end of the day this year, I know New York is going to be picking 8th overall. And I know I can draft someone really good or package picks and move up. I have all their assets written down from the picks to the players. The players now, I like the assets when it comes down to the players. The picks give them flexibility, but you know, unprotected Minnesota pick. That pick's probably going to be 23 to the 24th overall pick. You have an unprotected Philly pick that you got from the Royce O'Neal trade that came from Brooklyn and James Harden.
I like that. I like that trade a lot for Utah. I think that was a bad trade for Brooklyn. So
yeah. Now that Philly pick, that's unprotected. That Philly pick may or may not be. That pick's not going to be good. You know, that pick's not going to be good. And then you have your own pick, so you have one good pick. So then you move on to 2025. You have no picks in 2024, which is alarming. Which you have protections on the pick that you sent out to Oklahoma City that's protected, but it's still alarming because that pick falls right out of that protection. You have no picks. So in that next year, in the next year of your rebuilding, and then you know I agree. I do like the optionality they have in 2026 though with an unprotected pick. Well, not an unprotected pick, but they have their own pick, and then they have 2 swaps that they could potentially take advantage of. But even the 2029 pick from Minnesota, it's protected. You know, it's 1 through 5 protected. So it's like even if things do fall apart in 2029 for Minnesota, even if that pick, if that pick is the 4th overall pick, you know, the 5th overall pick, you're still not going to get that pick. And then it's like you got fair value as far as like the picks for Donovan Mitchell. You did not send Donovan Mitchell to the right place. I like all the swaps. I like the unprotected picks. I think that gives you a lot of optionality. But at the end of the day, you know, because I felt totally different before I heard Sheldon's take on it, because I was like, you know what, you got a lot of picks, a lot of unprotected picks, a lot of swaps, and a lot of young players. I like this team, but then I'm looking at them like those picks are not going to be good. And then I'm going to sum it up with talking about their young core like Sexton and Talen Horton-Tucker. I think those 2 players can really develop into something more with more of a runway in Utah. Ochai Agbaji, I love Ochai Agbaji. I was hoping that he was going to fall to Atlanta when I saw a couple players slip in there. Walker Kessler, like I said, I think Walker can be really good. I would assume he's going to be starting. Jared Vanderbilt, I'm pretty high on Jared Vanderbilt. You know, he's 23 as well. Marketing is what he is. Can he get better? Maybe, but is he gonna take like the biggest? No, he's not gonna.
He's looked pretty good for Finland this Eurobasket. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but he's looked pretty good. But
yeah, I've heard that he's been tearing up that league. But will it relate?
Probably not.
No, and. You know, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I do like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And then after that, I guess it's Malik Beasley or Udoku Uzubuki. So, yeah, they have some concerns. You know, they definitely have some concerns about, is this going to work? They're not, listen, Danny Ainge wants to go on video and to see a lot of people talking about, well, we're trying to compete for a championship. No, you're not. Your team, you're sitting in a rebuild, and the picks tell it. But at the same time, I'm gonna say this: and I'm going to wrap it up. But Oklahoma City, their picks came into the optionality that they have allows them to be involved in almost every discussion, right? On draft night, you saw they used their conditional picks to move up in the draft and draft Usamu Dang. I think they moved up and they took New York's pick, and New York picked up the 3 future conditional picks. Well, I think that comes in handy, having a lot of those picks that you can maneuver on draft night to move up, move down, get more assets, get a better player. And then obviously when a Kevin Durant comes available and you feel like your core is right there at taking that next threshold, if a guy like Kevin Durant, becomes available at the trade deadline, you say, hey, I've got 8 unprotected picks. I can move to you, how do you feel about that? And then, but I think that Danny Ainge, if he's going to make a deal with New York, he wanted all the picks and all the players. And you saw with Cleveland, I believe Justin Zanuck was doing the negotiating, but I kind of saw with Cleveland that he wanted more of the picks. He wasn't going to be able to get too many of the young players there. I would have wanted Okoro in that deal, or I would have liked Jared Allen. I would have even taken less picks to get a guy like Allen. I would have taken almost no picks if I could have got Evan Mobley. I'm
sure Evan Mobley was untouchable.
Yeah, Evan Mobley was probably untouchable in those talks. But Utah is a very interesting team. They have a lot of on paper assets, but are those assets going to turn out to be something that's really going to help Utah? I think that's a really good thing that you brought up. But
one thing I want to add too, right before you wrap up here, I think the one issue too with this is, let's say they're the worst team in the league this year. They have then a 13.5% chance of landing the number 1 pick. They also have a 48% chance of picking 5th. So like you're really getting on your hands and knees and praying to some ping pong balls about the direction of your franchise, that's the one issue here I have with OKC is, even with the Chet Holmgren thing, they were lucky to move up to number 2. Like they didn't have the second best odds. They got that. They got lucky with it. And let's say they pick, let's say they moved down instead of up, they could have been picking 6th possibly or something. Like if they end up with Benedict Mathurin here, how excited would we have been about their young core? Like I love Mathurin as a player, but you really, really do need to get lucky if this is your strategy, which is what makes it hard for me to view it as a viable strategy, because you need luck then, which is tough. That's the one thing I really don't like about it.
Yeah, and teams are really probably not going to allow you to trade into the number 1 overall pick.
Right.
Especially if that team knows they're taking Victor.
Yeah, right. And that's and now here there's a little qualifier. If Utah gets number 1 and they get Wembanyama, they're in a good spot.
Yeah.
And that's the issue with this, is when you're analyzing, so many people are afraid of saying, oh, the team that got all the picks lost, because they never know what those are going to turn into, and it could become really good. But it's also like a chance that, these picks become like nobodies, or, guys who are like the 6th overall selection. And it's like, I firmly believe the draft is loaded with talent every year, but like,
sure.
Is the 6th overall pick worth trading a 3-time All-Star who is 26 years old and worth trading a future Hall of Fame 3-time Defensive Player of the Year for? No. So that's where you get into a point where like you need some luck here with the lottery.
Yeah, you definitely do, and like that is pretty hard to get, because Houston's probably gonna end up with the number 1 overall pick. But Sheldon, it's been really, really fun for you all that have tuned in. Thank you all so much. Make sure you go subscribe to Utility Sports. He does all types of sports. Like I saw he's doing some NFL content over there. That's also going to be interesting. But listen, we have for sure got to show him some love. We gotta we gotta get him back in. Maybe next time I'll be over there. But this was for sure fun. We had some technical difficulties, but this is really, really fun. We talked some hoops, and we hope you all enjoyed. And for all the people that are gonna watch on the rerun, make sure you go subscribe to Utility Sports. They know what they're talking about over there, for sure. And listen, Sheldon is one of the best scouts out there. He has a really, really promising scouting career. And listen, you were hearing him strategize all types of game plans for Cleveland. So, very, very, very good coach as well. So, listen,
Well,
he
thanks,
has
man.
a very, very exciting future. So make sure you go to check him out, guys. Thank you all of you guys for tuning in. Again, this is really, really fun. And Sheldon, we for sure have to do this again.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me on, man.
And that's going to wrap up the show, guys. Again, go check him out. Thanks, Sheldon.